I do want to focus on abortion for a moment because 2 years ago, Roe v. Wade was overturned.
You don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government shouldn't be telling her what to do.
I just need to afford a bus ticket so I can get out of this abortion desert that I live in the South, so I can get to a state.
You're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body they don't have a right to make a decision about what happens to their body next?
In a revealing interview on the Call Her Daddy podcast, Kamala Harris makes it abundantly clear how everyone with a conscience should vote this coming November. But unfortunately, Barna research reveals that many Christians plan on not voting at all. We'll talk about why today on Indie Thinker. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Reed Huberman. Today on the show, I'll try to bridge the gap between culture and Christianity and tell you why critical thinkers are best when they are Christians and Christians are best when they are critical thinkers. Now, before I get there, I want to make sure that you know that today's show is sponsored by our friends over at Selah Ridge. If you're looking for a fantastic vacation spot, you need to check out our friends over there. Now, I know that you can save some money on where you stay when you go on vacation, but you don't need to do that. In fact, I was talking to my wife just recently about where we honeymooned, and let's just say they left the light on, but you kind of wish they hadn't when we actually saw where we were staying for our honeymoon, and that was 15 years ago. All that to say, you don't want to skimp on these memorable experiences that you're going to have with your family, with your spouse, and you want to make sure that you're staying at a place where you will create those kind of memories. So you can do that with our friends over at Selah Ridge. In order to see all the amenities and all the fantastic vacation spots they have for you, make sure to go to SelahRidgeTreesort.com. Whenever archaeologists make discoveries that are relevant to the Bible, it has always historically come back to show the historical reliability of Scripture. I also like it because it shows us something about history. It shows us something about human nature and about ourselves that we can learn in the present. This is the case especially when archaeologists have found startling discoveries in the sewers of ancient Rome that show when a Christian era began. Now, before Christianity became the national religion of the Roman Empire, unwanted babies, which unfortunately were far too common back then, and in particular females, would be discarded, thrown out by the side of the road or something like that. Now, if the babies weren't picked up by slave owners or by pimps, those babies would eventually die and then be flushed down into the sewers. Well, that all stopped when Rome became Christian. When Christians like Macrina, the older sister of Gregory of Nyssa and Basil the Great, these were prominent church fathers, by the way. When Macrina came onto the scene, Christians like her made sure that babies found a home and that this monstrous practice stopped. Tom Holland writes about this in his book Dominion, saying, girls in particular were liable to be winnowed ruthlessly. Those who were rescued from the wayside would invariably be raised as slaves. Brothels were full of women who as infants had been abandoned by their parents. Macrina, taking up the slight form or a starving baby in her arms, could know for sure that she was doing God's work. It's a shame today that the West is waxing less and less Christian, and as we do so, rather than hearing cries to save needy babies, we're hearing cries like "my body, my choice," and "get your bands off my body," and "it's just a fetus in my womb." And unfortunately, more often than not, those cries drown out the beautiful stories of people like Ava Trammell, who just recently on the I Like Birds podcast gave her heartwarming and gut-wrenching story of how, as a teenager, she became pregnant and then found out later that she was going to eventually miscarry whenever she delivered the baby, but decided, in fact, refused to have an abortion because she wanted to hold on to her baby for as long as she could and give her a warm place to live until the eventual happened. Here's her story.
This might be crazy, because I know she's not going to survive anyways, but I only have so much time left with her. Why should I cut it any shorter? She's safe in my womb. And at this point, I had been following a million pro-life organizations on Instagram. I've seen what an abortion looks like. And I said, I don't think I could bear to have her ripped piece by piece out of my womb and shorten the life that's already so short. Take her away from a spot where God has placed her in my hands, in my womb, where she's safe and she's warm and she only knows love and doesn't know pain. Why would I give her such a painful death when she's perfectly fine with me? I said, Today's the first day that I felt her kick. I already love her more than I can even express. Not that I didn't love her before, I loved her so much before, but feeling her kick, it's just, my baby was in there, and I couldn't bear the thought of having her removed.
That right there is about the only form of feminism that I could ever tolerate, because the maternal instinct there is on full display, and when it's actually shown in all of its glory, it is beautiful. It is undeniable. That's why Christians in the present, when they have the opportunity to save innocent lives, should jump at the chance to do so. But we're finding more and more, as our culture shifts less and less Christian, that they are not doing that. In fact, George Barna from the Cultural Research Center at ACU just recently released this finding, that over 104 million religious people do not plan on voting in 2024, and among them, 32 million regular church attenders are not voting for Kamala Harris or Trump. If it is not abundantly clear to you at this point in time who you should vote for, and that sidelines are not an option for any Christian in 2024, let me reveal to you Kamala Harris on the Call Her Daddy podcast as they talk about abortion.
At a rally in Pennsylvania, former President Trump recently told women, "You will be protected and I will be your protector." What do you make of that?
Already hard-hitting questions. I mean, very probing. Donald Trump is an evil man. What do you make of that? And this is going to be kind of the conversation throughout. Now, I do want us to be paying attention to innuendo and euphemism throughout this, because you're going to hear a lot about reproductive rights and women's health care and all of these things. And Kamala is going to be very careful not to actually say the word abortion, unlike our very crass friend on the other side of the table here. But just know that in order to see all of this correctly, you have to read through the euphemism of reproductive health and women's health care in order to hear the word abortion.
So he who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended, and there are now 20 states with Trump abortion bans, including bans that make no exception for rape or incest, which we just discussed, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body they don't have a right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral?
So no, here's what we're actually saying. We're saying that a baby should not be charged with the death penalty for the crime of another person. So the leftists in our country want to make sure that criminals get out of jail bond-free and don't do half of the time that they're supposed to do for the crimes that they've committed. In the meantime, they want innocent babies to be charged with the crimes of another person. So that's all we're saying, is just simply, if you want to have an intellectual, honest conversation, let's first of all state that the vast majority of abortions that take place in America are not done as a result of the R word, and that even if there was a situation where this had happened, this does not make the situation better, because 2 wrongs don't make a right. It's at least what my mama taught me. And then furthermore, it's important to know that what Kamala Harris is saying about abortion bans is totally ridiculous. There are 30 states in the United States where a baby can be so far along that you have to dilate the mother, put forceps into her womb, and then violently rip the legs and the arms off of a child in order to perform that abortion. So all that to say, Donald Trump didn't ban abortions. He put conservative justices in the Supreme Court. Those justices overturned Roe v. Wade, and then they returned the decision for abortion to the states. Now, that's actually something called the way our government is supposed to work. I know we're so used to Big Daddy government telling us what to do, but the federal government was supposed to have very limited power. And the state, which actually has a better way to govern the consent of the people, because we can actually vote on these things rather than the federal government just doing it behind closed doors. That's the way our government is supposed to function. So this is obviously something that Kamala Harris wants to run on, but she doesn't even know what she's talking about. Or better yet, she absolutely does, and she's just being a deceptive liar.
So this is the same guy that is now saying that? This is the same guy who said that women should be punished for having abortions? This is the same guy who uses the kind of language he does to describe women. So, yeah, there you go.
I do want to focus on abortion for a moment because 2 years ago, Roe v. Wade was overturned and women lost their constitutional right to an abortion.
Okay, I'm sorry to stop so much, but unfortunately we have to. There is no constitutional right to an abortion. I mean, I would love for you leftists to open up the Constitution. You talk about it a lot and know nothing about it. Open it up, please read through it, and then pinpoint the place where you have a constitutional right to kill your innocent baby. In fact, you have the opposite of that. Stop at the 14th Amendment, won't you? And then you'll see that that has an equal protection clause, which means that every single person in an individual state has the right to be protected and the right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, including unborn innocent babies.
I went to a preferred women's health center. I met with women that were getting screamed at and chanted at and called baby killers, and it was the most eye-opening experience I've ever had because I am a privileged white woman that lives in Los Angeles, and I am so aware of that. I understand that a lot of the younger generation sees things online and is like, what is right, what is wrong, what is real, what is not. Can you explain and talk about what is actually happening to abortion access right now in this country?
Yeah. So again, I thank you for what you've been doing.
What this woman has been doing podcasts about hall passes, blowjobs, and the puffy nipples of Post Malone.
I have poofy nipples.
Poofy. That sounds cute.
So thank you for that. What would our world be without more of this stupidity?
Public policy, I often tell my team, look, I don't want to hear about public policy is a fancy kind of speech or paper. Tell me how it'll affect a real person. So let's talk about how it affects a real person. The majority of women who receive abortion care are mothers.
Wait, the majority of women who receive abortion care are mothers? What else would they be?
So if she's in a state, and by the way, every state in the South, except for Virginia, has an abortion ban, okay? So imagine she's in a state with an abortion ban. 1 out of 3 women are, by the way, in our country. And she's a mom. So she's going to have to figure out, one, God help her if she has affordable childcare. God help her if she has paid leave. And then she's going to have to go to the airport, stand in a TSA line, sit on a plane next to a perfect stranger to go to a city where she's never been to receive the care she needs. She's going to probably have to get right back on that plane because she's got those kids. Her best friend's probably not with her because that's who's taking care of the kids. To get back in that TSA line, to get back on a plane, to go home.
And that's all if they can even afford the plane ticket or the bus ticket.
Exactly.
It's all a very moving story, and TSA does suck. But I can totally answer all of those questions with a very simple response. What about the baby? Yeah, I'm sure it's very difficult to cross state lines in order to pursue the death of your offspring, but it's also a lot worse for the baby. Trust me.
Because when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I remember my DMs were flooded with thousands of women begging me to help. And it's overwhelming. And I can't even imagine. I'm saying that in front of you, but it's overwhelming. And I remember...
Okay, I have to ask, what is this girl going to do? Why is her DMs being flooded? I mean, is she going to put on her cape and then just go around sleeping with everybody that she possibly can find and then abort all of the babies that come as a result of that? I mean, what is her superpower here? I would love to know.
People begging me like, I just need to afford a bus ticket so I can get out of this abortion desert that I live in the South so I can get to a state. But they can't even afford, you know what I mean? So it's like these people are literally landlocked into a position that they don't want to be.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing is that you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree The government shouldn't be telling her what to do. If she chooses, she'll talk to her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government telling you what to do. And that's what's so outrageous about it.
What's outrageous is that she's advocating for Roe v. Wade, which is the government telling you what to do with your body. What Donald Trump did is actually the reverse of that, which is the states now can decide. I mean, this is she's such a liar. The fact that you can even vote for somebody like that is egregious to me. Now, you may say Donald Trump is a liar too, but at least he's not lying about the murder of innocent children. Again, you decrying the fact that men at the state level are refusing to let women get abortions, but then absolutely demanding that men at the federal level demand that they do get abortions is just the epitome of hypocrisy. And all of this presumes anyway that the baby in your belly isn't a baby. It's just a clump of cells. It's just a fetus. In fact, it's just a parasite, actually. We don't even know how it got there, in fact. It's probably just some sickness. Maybe you picked it up while you were maybe close to a playground or something like that, where those disgusting parasites like to hang out and play. But however you got it, just know there's a cure for it. A cure.
Is a bunch of these guys up in these state capitals are writing these decisions because they somehow have decided that they're in a better position to tell you what's in your best interest than you are to know what's in your own best interest. It's outrageous.
It's outrageous. I mean, daddy gang, to put it in our TikTok terms, I have seen girls on the street walk up to men and be like, do you know where a tampon goes? Do you know how many tampons we use? Do you even know how, do you know what a X or Y or Z is of a part of our, and they don't know the answer.
Just a thought. Don't sleep with these stupid men and then have babies with them. Because I can understand why you wouldn't want that idiot to be the father of your baby, but maybe before you spread him, you should be thinking about that. Rather, get a man who is man enough not to sit down and lay in bed with you until he is ready to start a family with you. Okay?
He's the first vice president or president to ever, in office, go to a reproductive health care clinic, ever.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I didn't know that, but I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. To your point.
And yet the men are making the decisions about our bodies.
And here's the other thing about this point, it's about IVF treatments and access. It's about access to contraception, which is very much at risk with these folks. It is about, back to the point about reproductive health clinics. You know what those clinics also do? They do PAPs. They do breast cancer screenings. They do HIV testing. And they're having to close in many places with these bans. So think about the fact that for anyone who has gone to one of these clinics, you understand that it is sometimes the most trusted place where people receive that kind of health care, because they walk into those places that are generally staffed by people who create a safe place for people to come in without judgment. So anyone seeking any kind of reproductive health care and wanting to go to a place where they feel safe and without judgment, these clinics have often been the place that people can go. And many of them are having to close because of these laws.
Did you notice the lie? The implicit, in fact, it's so implicit it's almost explicit, acknowledgement is that the moment you take abortions away from these places, they have to close down because that is their bread and butter. Although at the same time, she's trying to say, these places do all sorts of things for women. Now, let me tell you where these flawed and fake statistics come from. Because Planned Parenthood is notorious for lying about the services that they actually provide to people. In fact, it's in the name. How does a place that's called Planned Parenthood give people the pills that will chemically castrate them if they're interested in planning parenthood? Of course, this is a euphemism because the left loves euphemisms. And they love to lie is really what the problem is. And Planned Parenthood lies about what kind of services they provide all the time. This is the way this works. They will bring somebody in that wants to come in for an abortion or something like that. They'll talk to them about STDs, and then they'll say, well, we did STD care. And then they'll talk to them about HIV screenings, and they'll say, we did HIV preparation care. And then they'll say, hey, did you know we do PAPs and we also do breast cancer screenings and all these things? And every single one of those individual conversations will be counted as something that they did, and then they will perform an abortion. So already that's 4 to 1. But the real way to count this is obviously in terms of the resolution services. And that's where the Lozier Institute is incredibly helpful. So resolution services are simply what did you come in for and what was performed specifically. And when you look at Planned Parenthood, as far as that is concerned, the evidence is clear what these places are all about. In 20 and 21, abortions made up 97% of resolution services at Planned Parenthood, while parental services, miscarriages, and adoption referrals make up 1.6%, 0.7%, and 0.5% respectively. And if you're interested in knowing who actually pays for all of these abortions, well, you'll be glad to know that you do. Almost $1.9 million per day comes in from taxpayer funding in government grants, contracts, and Medicaid reimbursements. And from 20 to 21, during the pandemic no less, they had a little bit of an off year and only 374,000 abortions were performed at Planned Parenthood. Are you starting to get what this organization is really all about, other than lying?
It's a safe place for people to come in without judgment. So anyone seeking any kind of reproductive health care and wanting to go to a place where they feel safe and without judgment, these clinics have often been the place that people can go. And many of them are having to close because of these laws.
I was raised Catholic, and abortion is a sin. And when I put out that episode, I had a lot of women reach out to me saying like, wow, I live in the South and I never thought about it that way. Like, maybe I am pro-choice because I won't get an abortion because of my religion, but why should we control what someone else wants to do?
And you know what's interesting, Alex, to your point, what I'm finding as I travel? People who before 2 years ago, before Roe v. Wade was overturned, people who felt very strong about that they are anti-abortion, are now seeing what's happening and saying, I didn't intend for all this to happen. And I think that's also why in state after state, so-called red states and so-called blue states, when this issue has been on the ballot, the American people are voting for freedom. Because ultimately it's about, look, this is not about imposing my thoughts on you in terms of what you do with your life or your body. It's actually quite the opposite. It's saying the government shouldn't be telling people what to do.
Well, actually, Kamala, laws are made based upon the decree of the government and the consent of the people, and they do control your body. In fact, that's what the government is supposed to do at its basic core, is to tell you that you can't take your body and hurt somebody else's body. That knife that's in your hand, could you just please put it down? You can't stick it in somebody else's abdomen. We do kind of tell you what to do with your body as the government. So in like fashion, the government should be telling you what to do when what you want to do is harm the most innocent and precious lives among us. And this should be so obvious that it is unconscionable that anybody, regardless of who you are, would even think about voting for Kamala Harris. Not to mention the fact that her voice throughout that whole podcast was absolutely annoying. Do you really want a State of the Union, a fireside chat with that? The answer to that is clear, but it should be just as clear for Christians. How could a Christian even think about sidelining the power of their vote at a crucial time like this? Let me be very clear with you if you're one of those Christians who would say to yourself, I don't see my values reflected in either candidate, therefore I'm not voting this year. What you're doing first and foremost is largely symbolic, because somebody is going to win. Sorry, libertarians, it's not going to be a third-party candidate. It's either going to be the Democrat.
The children of the community are the children of the community.
Or the Republican. And it's best that you vote for the person who best reflects your values. And If you're a good person, the value of protecting innocent life should be among them. So you abstaining from voting is doing nothing than a symbolic gesture that makes you feel better about yourself, but doesn't actually help those around you. And Christians have been doing that kind of religiousness for far too long. This is why the whole claim of, I'm not political, I just preach the gospel and I just focus on Jesus, is nothing but a misnomer. If you won't vote for your values, trust me, nobody else will. And then the second thing is this: if you think that you're doing anything just by not voting that makes you somehow righteous, please let me remind you that there are sins of commission and sins of omission. That it isn't just what you do that's sinful, but sometimes what you don't do when you had the opportunity to do it, like in this upcoming election. And then finally, I would just say, based upon what you just heard, there is a clear choice for Christians if you think critically on this issue. Even if you buy into the idea that Donald Trump is a moral monster when it comes to women and money. Look at all these lawsuits. How can you as a Christian vote for a convicted felon? So let's forget for a moment that all of those lawsuits, oddly in time for an election, seem planned to be the Justice Department going after a political enemy, Soviet style.
I must break you.
Let's take that for granted and just say all of the things that they accuse Donald Trump of are true. If you're a Christian and you don't like Donald Trump's money practices or his practices with women, but you are willing to vote for a woman who would advocate for the murder of innocent babies, then you may not like Donald Trump's bad morals, but you don't have any morals and you have no ground to stand on. If you won't stand on that one issue, then you have nothing to say about morality because you're a hypocrite. All I can tell you is this, is that it seems to me that the only way that you could make this choice to vote for a pro-choice candidate, if you are a Christian, is because in the present, based upon our postmodern and morally relativistic age, we've turned Christianity into a choice. Well, Christianity is just my own personal faith, and I just believe in God, and it's my choice to be a Christian, rather than what real Christianity is, which is historic and biblical. See, when you make Christianity a personal choice, you root it outside of its historical context. And let me just give you an example. If every single Christian before you would never say what you are saying in the present, good bet that your Christianity is just completely made up and you're just labeling it Christianity, but it isn't Christianity at all, because Christianity has a historical context. So don't be a prisoner of the culture. Be a prisoner of what God says in His Word. And that's the second thing. Christianity is biblical. It is rooted within the confines of Scripture. Now, a lot of people are going to say, get your religion out of my womb. What place does your religion have in a conversation about laws in our secular government? Well, excuse me for a second. Especially on the issue of abortion. Forgive me if I don't recognize that a pagan offering of your baby on the altar of Molech in order to get magically, somehow, with the snap of a finger, a better life. If you're just willing to sacrifice your baby on the altar of expedience, then all of a sudden, magically, you will be blessed with a prosperous life. Forgive me if I don't notice that that's actually a religious standpoint. It just happens to be a pagan religion, which Christianity, thankfully, long ago, kicked out of the West. Now, we want to try to bring it back in, but our lives were better without it. So let's just be real that everybody's Bible is open. It's just that you have a pagan Bible and I have Holy Scripture on my side. And my Holy Scripture tells me this, that God formed that baby in the womb. It is a precious life made in the image of God and worthy of protection. If you don't realize that, well, then you need to get a Bible. Or at least you need to get a good pastor who will disciple you on this issue. And then for the love of God, vote right so that no more innocent lives have to be lost. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this podcast, comment down below. But most importantly, go with God.